This is the Jug O Sip podcast. In the 90s and early 2000s, the world was a little bit more shallow. It was less sensitive to political correctness. It was less sensitive to gay culture.
At the time, we were in an era that Tyler Durden from Fight Club would refer to as the middle children of history.
Right.
There was no Great War, no Great Depression.
It was when
the point he was making is that there was no conflict that defined or allowed them to grow as character.
Gen X's world. It was Gen X's world at the time, really. Yeah. Now we millennials are sharing it with Gen X. But it was just a little. There was more stuff to be shallow about. Like, you didn't have as many major problems in the world, so people were kind of up their own ass. And Will, Grace, Karen, and Jack were also characters that were up their own ass. They were very toxic people. I wouldn't even necessarily call them all bad people. They were toxic, not even to other people, just to themselves even. They hurt so many people in the process. Will had abandonment issues because his mom was frigid and cold. His partner, I think of 7 years, left him. He only had Grace, so he was a very wounded guy. And he leaned on Grace as a literal crutch because since college, they're all each other had. And more importantly, it's established that they love each other, but because he's gay, they could never be more than just deeply loving friends, which I think created a toxic issue in Grace that she low-key on some level, whether it was conscious or not, was sort of hoping that would change.
Yeah, they developed an extreme codependency.
They had such a extreme, they were each other's crutch. So much so that at the 2020 final episode ever of Will and Grace, they get a house together and decide to raise their kids together. Now, there's going to be a lot of spoilers, so if you haven't seen the series through, you might not want to listen right away. Go watch and, develop your own opinions first. When the series first ended in 2006, the original series, it ended with Will and Grace having a kid together.
Yeah.
And then they, for some reason, ended that. And then they did basically essentially the same fucking thing anyway. Like, it was hardly any different. So that said, they both also, Will and Grace both had a deep issue of not wanting to become their mothers, but were doing that anyway.
Right.
Grace used Will as a crutch. She was deeply narcissistic. She thought she could do no wrong. Will only enabled that by being like, oh, honey, it's not you. And they just fed off of each other's poison.
Right.
Will and Jack and Karen were more obviously toxic because they were sort of supposed to be. They were supposed to be, as they described them in the earlier series, as a funhouse version of Will and Grace. So Karen was an alcoholic, pill-addicted, rich woman who was privileged, racist, and sort of a bitch, and yet sort of not. She was kind of complex. Jack is a very well-intended puppy-like person who has Puriturnus, which is Peter Pan syndrome, which he refuses to grow up. The thing about these characters is I wouldn't have a problem with any of this if I felt like the characters ever faced consequences or learned anything. But even from 98 all the way through 2020 in both versions of the series, no one fucking learned a damn thing, at least for a long period of time. And I will throw you out some examples, and I'm going to explain to you why I think Grace is worst of all of them.
Yeah.
Well, first, in the new series, Will finally, mind you, Will and Jack met in like 1984, 1985,
right.
The mid-80s.
Right.
Jack helped Will come out because Jack was open about being gay and loved who he was despite being younger than Will. And for some godforsaken fucking reason, Will has had this thing up his ass saying that he needs to protect and take care of Jack because Jack helped him come out. On top of which, I think it low-key makes Will feel good about himself to be able to take care of somebody.
He had a thing up his ass?
Irrelevant.
It's just an interesting way to explain
Good
that.
point. Maybe I shouldn't be saying so much ass stuff right now. It's a little too on the nose. But
it's on
also
the ass too.
Will had this fatherly energy throughout the series, and it's addressed that he tries to put these paternal feelings onto Jack and other people.
Yeah.
And again,
You can find us on Google and all social media at Jug O Sip Podcast.
New episodes release every Monday and Friday.